Previously on
All right,
Gears.
let's take a look at the world of Formula One. Of course, this weekend is the Malaysian Grand Prix. Are you going to do a quiz on us a little bit later?
Yes.
All right, so we won't do any of the major stats about the Malaysian Grand Prix.
No, you can.
Okay, no problem. But let's have a look at what has been happening this morning. And there were two sessions, one at 4 a.m. South African time till 5:30, and then a little bit of sleep, and then, of course, up at 8 for the second one. Dry conditions, which I think was quite important because they are predicting rain over the course of the weekend as well. So in dry conditions, we had most of the drivers and riders going out there and performing an extensive amount of laps. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this that perhaps maybe you should know. One is that they are all still trying to find more and more solutions for these new rule changes that they have. But a very important aspect is that they get an extra set of free tires in the first free practice of the Friday weekend. That means they want to get out there and try and get to understand the tires as much as possible. So that's why we're seeing quite a lot of running from the teams. Those that can run, we must emphasize, because there are certain cars that still seem to have all sorts of issues, and it's not looking very positive. One can only just imagine the frustration that a lot of these drivers are having at the moment. So let's just have a look at what happened in the free practice sessions from earlier this morning. And oopsie, I just got to make sure we get the right ones here. Well, yeah, that's where's the first free practice? There we go. Lewis Hamilton was quickest in the first free practice session of this morning. Managed to do 19 laps. Then the Ferrari of Kimi Räikkönen. Then the next Mercedes of Nico Rosberg. Then the two McLarens. Then Jean-Eric Vergne in the Toro Rosso. Red Bull's Sebastian Vettel was in 7th place. Hülkenberg, Massa and Bottas rounded out the top 10 from the first free practice this morning. Notable problems. Caterham, Kamui Kobayashi only managed to do 5 laps. Sergio Perez for Force India managed to do 2 laps. And the two Lotai, Pastor Maldonado and Romain Grosjean, managed to do 2 and 4 laps respectively without posting a time. So these teams really have big problems. Now, the second free practice session, which was later on this morning South African time, Nico Rosberg was the quickest man, but this I find very significant. First up until 7th place was only split by just over 3/10 of a second. Now, we're not entirely sure of the fuel loads, but we'll get into I'll tell you a little bit about the race pace of all of the drivers, or the top drivers. But in terms of just, if you just look at the times and sit there and hypothetically say that they're all sort of on the same fuel loads, I think that is very significant. The top 3 drivers, which is a Mercedes, a Ferrari, and a Red Bull, are split by 6/100ths of a second. So Rosberg was ahead of Räikkönen, then Vettel, then Hamilton, then Alonso, then Massa, which looked very good for Williams, then Danny Ricciardo, then the first of the McLarens 7/10ths down. Button was in 8th, Valtteri Bottas, and then rounding out the top 10, another sterling performance from the one and only Nico Hülkenberg. Looking at the bottom again, Kamui Kobayashi, no laps. Pastor Maldonado, no laps. Romain Grosjean, 4 laps. Big problems for Caterham, big problems for Lotus. And, the two Marussia cars, they did manage to do laps, but woefully off the pace as well. So lots to be done there as well. Just some other news that has emanated. Of course, we do have the big controversy about the FIA fuel flow system that Red Bull are complaining about. And, of course, it'll go to a hearing on the 14th of April. But before we get there, according to Ferrari's lack of pace in the Australian Grand Prix was caused by a software glitch outside of its control that left both of its drivers without full energy recovery boost. Now, I'm not too sure, hopefully from Ferrari's point of view that is true, and we do see a different kind of Ferrari this weekend. I must say, watching the cars today, they were quick, but wow, they seem to be really, really difficult with the back end of the car. So if they can get that right, I think all of a sudden, if that is a software problem that they had, they might be right on the pace of Mercedes. But having said that, we still have to go and wait and see if that is true or not. Then looking at Red Bull. Now, Red Bull, of course, were disqualified from the Australian Grand Prix because of the fuel flow issue. Now, Red Bull says it will seek FIA clarification on the fuel flow situation after the Formula One champion squad suffered another sensor failure during the free practice session. On Friday, which is earlier this morning, Red Bull had to replace a fuel flow sensor in Ricciardo's car after it failed during the first practice session. Now, Christian Horner came out and says, I think we will have that conversation with Charlie Whiting beforehand. It will be clear if we do see a variance. What we are going to do, hopefully we can agree something that is sensible. He said we had a signal failure on Danny's car this morning immediately, so obviously have replaced that for this afternoon session, and I haven't had the results of that. So we'll wait to see what's going on. Because as mentioned yesterday, there is a big problem for Red Bull, because if they lose their appeal on this ruling by the FIA, but they continue in this Grand Prix in Malaysia and next week in Bahrain to continue to fiddle with the FIA instrumentation, they could be disqualified and lose points from 3 different races. So you've got to be very, very careful. So I think this is also Christian Horner, Charlie Whiting are going to sit, and I think maybe this is the right way they should have done it the first time, is sit behind closed doors and say, okay, here is an issue. What is the compromise? What is the result? I just find it rather bizarre that it's only happening on one specific car at this stage. We know that in Australia there were other variances reported by other teams, but they all used the compliant FIA fuel flow valves. So what is the solution? I think we might get something later on this evening out of that, or otherwise tomorrow morning. There we go. That's a look at our world of Formula One.
Gearsonballs.co.za. Weekdays 1 p.m. to 3 p.m.